Alright folks, welcome back. We're going to continue talking about redstone basics. In this video we're going to cover how to transmit the redstone signal farther than 16 blocks using repeaters. Repeaters are also referred to as repeater delayers, and I'll get to that. And we also want to talk about inverters. Inverters are very important. They're used in just about every redstone circuit that actually serves some purpose. And then we also want to talk about how to transmit the redstone signal in the up and down direction, because we haven't really covered that, and there are a few different ways to do it. There's sort of some basic techniques to understand, and you can kind of mix and match them depending on the situation that you need to use it for. Let's see, then after that we want to talk about a slightly more advanced topic, and that's a redstone clock. And no, I don't mean the clocks that you craft in the game, I mean an actual redstone clock. And what that is going to do is it's going to create a pulsing or a ticking circuit that is constantly turning on and off. And we'll show how to do that. So anyways, with that said, let's get right to it. We're gonna start talking about repeaters here. Let me get my camera all fixed here. Okay, so we've got a few demos set up here. So the first thing we want to talk about is something we addressed in the first video, and that's that redstone signal only travels 16 blocks from its source. So we've got the lever on there, and that's acting as a source, and you'll notice that at the 16th block here, it dies and does not reach this redstone block. So we achieve the desired effect by going beyond 16 blocks by using this, the repeater. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to shut this one off, and we'll turn this one on, and there you go. So let's take a look at what it's doing. So the repeater block itself has an input side right here and an output side right there. And when it's receiving redstone signal on the input side, it will repeat redstone signal at full strength from its output side. So basically this signal strength is the same as what you would see coming out of the lever, and it will go another 16 blocks from the output of the redstone repeater. So that seems pretty obvious. It repeats the signal and repeats it at full strength. But you notice that the repeater block has these posts on there, and when you right click it, that post shifts position. Now you're not seeing anything different happening here, but what this actually is this is the repeater delayer's actual delay function. So the redstone repeater in its default state is at its default delay setting, and the delay setting is represented by the distance between the posts. So the shorter the distance, the shorter the delay, the longer the distance, the longer the delay. So what delay am I talking about? The delay is actually the amount of time it takes for the redstone repeater to turn on and off after it receives the signal or loses the signal. So the amount of delay is actually referred to in its default state. It is 1 redstone tick. Now 1 redstone tick is a unit of time that is equivalent to 2 game ticks or 2 Minecraft ticks. Now 2 Minecraft ticks just so happen to be 1/20th of a second apiece. So you've got 2/20ths of a second. That equates to 1/10th of a second. But I like to refer to these delay settings in milliseconds. So that's, 1,000 milliseconds is 1 second. So when I say that this delay setting, this shortest delay setting, has 100 milliseconds of delay, that means it's 1/10th of a second. So I'm just going to refer to the delay settings in milliseconds because that makes more sense to me. So this first setting is 100 milliseconds. Second is 200, 300, 400. So 400 is just shy of a half of a second, so you should be able to recognize this pretty easily. We're going to go ahead and turn it off, and then you notice when I turn it back on, it's going to take about 4/10ths of a second to turn back on. There you go. And the same thing's going to happen when it turns off. When I turn it off, about 4/10ths of a second to take it off. And just to reinforce that, I've got this here. The button kind of allows you to see that delay with side by side with a lamp that's turning on and off instantaneously. So you notice it turns on late and turns off late. So there you go. So now you can take advantage of that delayed signal by stringing a whole pile of redstone repeaters right end to end, and I've got all of these on their lowest delay setting. So each one of these blocks is adding 400 milliseconds to the delayed signal. So you'll notice again here I flip this on, and this is going to take a lot longer of a time. I think I can actually run to the lamp before it turns on. And the same thing happens when you shut it off. So when I shut it off, it takes a long time for that repeater or all those repeaters to shut off. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about are inverters, and we've got a great example right in front of us here. The inverter is actually this little guy right here. The inverter is nothing more than a redstone signal running up to a block that conducts the redstone signal, and then on that block we've placed a redstone torch. Now what happens is when this circuit gets powered, it powers the block, and that shuts off the torch. The torch, basically in any situation when the torch is receiving power, it will shut off. I don't really think I need to demonstrate it other than just this example here. It's getting close to nighttime, so I'm going to go ahead and change it to day real quick. There we go, that's better. So anyways, let's see this in action. What I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this on, so you see that this circuit becomes powered, powers this block, and then shuts off that torch. So since this torch is shut off and it's the only thing powering this circuit, that lamp turns off. So what you've got is an inversion of the on-off signal. So it's in an on position, so this lamp is turning on. But if you wanted this down position to be off for a light, then you'd use an inverter. And that's what inverters are for. Anytime you need to reverse the type of signal, you can use an inverter to do it. All right, so let's move on. Now that we've got that stuff covered, we now know how to repeat a signal, and we know how to invert a signal. Those are both concepts that are going to be important in talking about the next thing, which is how to transmit redstone signal in up and down direction. We're going to focus on up first, and we're going to use probably the most simple design, which is this. It's probably the most intuitive. I've got a redstone source here with the lever right here, and that circuit just leads up in a spiral staircase, and it leads up to the top here, and you'll notice that this whole kind of construction requires a 2x2 footprint, and as high as you need it to go, and you can stop it wherever you need the output to be. The only limitation with this design is that without a repeater or inverter anywhere in the construction, you can only go 16 blocks in the vertical. If you wanted to use this sort of basic design, you could eventually slap on a repeater, but you're actually going to end up having to take up more space. You'd have to do something like build out, then up here, and then replace this block with a repeater like that. And that would work. So that would only take up a 2x3 footprint rather than a 2x2, and you'd have your same effect by repeating it, and you'd go another 16 blocks after the repeater. Okay, so that's method one. This other method here uses half slabs and actually allows you to have a much more compact design here. Now, the quirk about redstone with half slabs, we talked about this in the first video, you can only place redstone on half slabs that are at a whole Y value. You'll see right now I'm at Y value 5. When I'm down on this one, I'm at 4.5, and I cannot place redstone on top of that. So it's critical that in this construction, the redstone is placed onto half slabs that are at a whole Y value. So each one of these is set up like that. And what's happening here is that when the half slab is at the whole Y value, it actually is sort of taking up the whole block, but the redstone signal is actually still being allowed to transmit underneath the block itself. So this piece of redstone is going up, and then up, and then up, and all the way up. And on that note, this sort of construction only works in the up direction. You actually cannot reverse this process. There's no way to put a redstone source up at the top. I guess I should prove that to you. Maybe try to put it on that block. There we go. Then I'm going to shut this off. And you'll notice that only this piece of redstone is now on. And it's just that simple. This redstone circuit won't connect down there, but it will connect going the up direction. Don't ask me why, other than anything I've already explained. But that's the one drawback there. You can use half slabs to go in the up direction and keep it nice and compact. Again, you're going to have the limitation. You can only go 16 blocks in the vertical unless you use a repeater or a delayer. A repeater layer or a inverter. So let's say you're not not opposed to the idea of using an inverter. Then you can use this sort of technique. You can go as high as you want and take the the smallest footprint possible. So this is basically just a bunch of inverters stacked on top of each other. You've got the source here, and then a block with an inverter on it, and that's immediately underneath another block with an inverter on it, or a torch on top of it. So each one sort of acts as an inverter to switch the other one on or off above it. The only limitation with this design, first of all, there is the redstone delay of one redstone tick, or 1/10 of a second, with each one of these inverters switching on and off. So this basically works out to 3/10 of a second delay. The other one is that, depending on what you want the state of the on-off switch to be, and what you want the desired result to be, you might not actually be able to get this to line up in the right position that you want the output to be. So, for example, like let's say you want to design this as a light post, where the switch would actually be turning on the light, but you wanted that light to actually be on already and at that height. Now, the problem is, there's no way to get it on right now and at that height just because of the way this is built, especially if you want the lever to be at this height. So the way around that, this takes up a different footprint, obviously, but another way to arrange the repeaters, it takes a few more inverters. Another way to arrange the inverters is like this sort of zigzag approach. So you've got the block here, this torch is on that one, this torch powers that one, this torch powers that one, and so on and so forth. So zigzag back and forth. It takes a few more torches to get to the same height, but it also allows you to go to whatever height you want with the desired effect. And now if I wanted it to be off at any one of these heights, it could just be on the other side, so you could flip-flop it with whichever side you want it to be on. But obviously the drawback is that the footprint is different. It also takes a little bit longer to transmit the signal. But I think the real idea is that you can use a combination of these two. So you could figure out another way to, for example, you could put a redstone torch here and then place a block right in front of it. So there you go. Now you've got an on position. So you basically sort of applied both concepts on that one technique. And that's really the point of all this. The point is to teach you guys some different concepts and allow you to mix and match them given your application of how you want to do it. I don't want to ramble too much about that. Let's just go on to talking about how to transmit in the down direction, because believe it or not, it's actually a little bit different. Like I said, the half slab approach won't work, but the spiral staircase in the 2x2 footprint works just as well. It's basically the same thing. It goes in the other direction, and then when you want to go farther than 16 blocks, you just have to slap a repeater on there, and it works. So I don't really think I have to cover too much about that. So the other way to transmit in the down direction and taking up a smaller footprint is to use that zigzag approach, but because we're going in the down direction, we can't actually get these things right on top of each other and have the desired effect. There are a couple of reasons for it. First and foremost, if these two blocks were sort of right kitty corner to each other, then I couldn't place this piece of redstone block on top of it because it would be occupying the same space as this redstone torch. So that's physical limitation number one. The other thing is that you'll get redstone confusion by this torch turning on and powering this one, and you'll basically break the switch. The switch won't work anymore. It'll just stop. So yeah, you have to have the blocks in this configuration, and what you do is you place, you have the input block be your first inverter. The inverter powers a piece of redstone, which sits on the next inverter. And when that one's powered, it shuts off this one, which allows this one to turn on, and you can already see it. All the ones on this side are on, and all the ones on this side are off. And when I flip to the other position, they all reverse. So depending on what output you want, you basically just put a block, however you want it. And that's how you move redstone signal down, or transmit it in the down direction. Okay, so I feel like the basics are covered, and as I said, the last thing we're going to talk about are clocks, redstone clocks. And remember when I was talking earlier, I said that redstone clock is really a sort of pulsing or ticking redstone circuit that's constantly turning on and off. So let's look at how that works. Hopefully by now you recognize that we've got an inverter here, and we have a redstone repeater, and that repeater's output is being placed on top of the inverter. So what's going to happen here is when I place a piece of redstone right here, it's going to take the signal from the torch and supply it as input to the repeater, turning the repeater on, which will power this circuit here, which will actually shut off the torch, which will shut off the repeater, and so on and so forth. There's your loop that will repeat over and over again. So there you go. It's flipping on and off, and nighttime has arrived just in time for us to get the nice lighting effect. It turns out that the repeater, when it's in use here, actually helps to adjust the pace of the clock itself. So you notice as I slow down the delay, we actually slow down the ticking of the clock. So you might be asking, well, what happens when I go to the fastest setting? That happens. It works for a while, then burns out. Occasionally, we'll see if it happens here. Yeah, it switches back on for a while, then it'll burn out again. Sometimes this happens irregularly for some people. I think it really is dependent on your computer and how fast it runs or whatever. Sometimes I see these things click on and off really quickly, and they'll shut off and burn out, then come back alive, and then shut off and burn out. They do really crazy things. But basically, if you get the clock going too fast, it sort of jumps ahead of itself and gets confused and burns out. So when it burns out, the only way to fix it is to break a piece of the redstone and allow the whole thing to get unconfused, and then you resupply the redstone and make sure that it's not ticking too fast. So yeah, so that's just one way of building a clock. It's actually pretty small, pretty compact, and works pretty well, but there might be situations where you need some slightly different designs of a clock. So I've got one that's very similar to this, but a slightly different design. It actually uses fewer pieces of redstone. We've just got 2 pieces of redstone here, a torch and a repeater, but it's basically doing the exact same thing. What's happening here is the repeater is powering this block. That block powers this piece of redstone, which powers this block, and there's your loop. It takes up the same footprint, but it might be used in a situation where you need to make sure that a piece of redstone nearby does not get confused with the circuit. So you might be able to place a piece of redstone here that is not affected by the clock at all and needs to be part of a completely separate circuit. Whereas if you were to try to do that with this guy, you might run into a situation where you've got some entangled circuits that aren't supposed to be talking to each other. And then another configuration I think is really important to remember is this one. So this is one that only takes up a 2x3 space in the vertical and is actually only 1 block wide. So what we got here is we got the torch, and torch powers this block, which powers the repeater, which powers this block, which powers that piece of redstone, which powers that block, and bam, there's your circuit. There's your ticking clock. And with all of these, the repeater delayer adjusts the pace of the clock. But let's say you wanted to build a clock without any repeaters. Let's say you just didn't want to craft repeaters, you didn't have any nearby. You can use this design. It's actually just a string of inverters. This is probably the smallest version of it. You can do another version of it. I think you can do. Let me see if I can just come up with it right now. Gets a little crazy. Well, actually, here's probably the simplest clock that really gets disastrous really quick. So you can already kind of see what I'm going to do here. I'm going to place this piece of redstone here, which will shut off that torch, and bam, it burns out. So you get that to happen really quickly. So there's a really small clock, but highly ineffective. It always tends to have problems. So here's a clock that uses just inverters. All you need is 3 inverters and a few pieces of redstone, and you've got it taken care of. But there might also be situations where you need a really long, or let's say, rather, a really slow ticking clock. So I'm going to place a redstone lamp down here, and you'll see that this one shuts on and off very slowly, much slower paced than the rest of these. And the reason is because I've got 3 repeaters, all with the slowest delay setting, all in a row. So it takes a while for this signal to work its way around. If you needed it to be even slower than this, you just add more repeaters at the lowest setting. And you can actually really fine-tune it by adjusting these things. So I can actually speed it up by just a tenth of a millisecond, or a tenth of a second at a time with each one of these repeaters. This can come in handy when you're trying to create long count clocks, but long count clocks usually involve using something like a dispenser, something that spits out items very slowly. Let's see if this works. It's not working. What I want to do is this. So yeah, anyway, long count clocks usually use something like a container that has some sort of space. Dispenser or a dropper are usually the ones that are always used. You could use hoppers. At any rate, it's an object that has a certain amount of items in it and is slowly dumping those items out. Now, the way you would actually trigger something, trigger a circuit to activate upon emptying or upon this dispenser becoming empty would be using a comparator block. But I don't want to talk about comparator blocks in this video. I'm going to leave that for the next episode. That's a completely different video. And on that note, that's where I'm going to stop this video. Like I said, comparative blocks are what I'm going to talk about next time. I'm not even going to go into it now. There are a lot of applications to comparators. That's why they're going to get their own video to talk about them. So that's it, folks. That's all I got. Until next time, I'll catch you when we're ready to talk about comparators.